Hello, this is Tracy Ensminger. Welcome to my presentation of When Ethics and Policies Collide. Establishing the facts. First-year assistant principal Richard Inman had worked very hard cultivating a relationship with a group of junior high students from the South Side. Richard himself was from that neighborhood, and his efforts were paying off. The students were doing better and associating with other students. 15-year-old James was the leader of the group. School, Rocket Junior High. It's a school with an enrollment of 900 students. Students James and David Ramos. James was muscular and heavily tattooed, 15 years old, and had been showing improvement in his grades and behavior, but this particular week he had 3 tardies. David Ramos was a slightly built 13-year-old in honors classes, band, and he was an exemplary student. Also involved was a security guard and a teacher. The day had started like any other, but soon things would take a turn for the worse. Assistant Principal Richard Inman is forced to make a tough ethical decision in regards to an exchange between 2 students. Richard takes very little time to evaluate and communicate the information before making his decision. Having a strong commitment to student well-being, advocating and modeling ethics, and cultivating ethics in others, Richard has his own ethical dilemma to come to terms with. Richard must also make a decision that promotes the current and future success and well-being of each student and adult. Richard chose this day to call James out of class to his office to visit with him about his tardies that week. James' 5th period teacher immediately called Richard back to report that shortly after James had been summoned, there was an exchange in the hall between James and David. The teacher stated that David was quite nervous. Richard was concerned that there may have been drugs involved. After taking a short time to consider the circumstances, Richard asked the school police officer to escort David Ramos to Richard's office at Rocket Junior High. James arrived first, and with David and the police officer shortly after. Once everyone was in Richard's office, he questioned the boys about what had happened. James stated that he had given David something to hold for him. When David was questioned, he began to shake. Tears welled up, and he refused to speak. The officers searched David and found a pair of brass knuckles, which was a prohibited weapon and constituted a felony offense. The officer handcuffed David, and he began to cry. James stated that he had told David that he would kick his butt if he didn't hold the knuckles for James. James further stated that the knuckles were his, and that he was going to use them to take care of some personal business after school. While Richard was proud of James for taking responsibility for the situation, his pride was quickly dashed when the officer did not remove David's handcuffs. Richard asked the officer why he did not take the cuffs off of David, and the officer stated that he had to take both David and James to jail and charge them with felony possession of a prohibited weapon on school property. Additionally, both boys would be expelled for no less than 45 days due to the district's zero-tolerance policy. The boys would be allowed to attend the district's disciplinary education program. Richard realized that his thoughtlessness had created the situation that left both boys in handcuffs and being led away. What kind of society created policies that required a 13-year-old child to stand up to a bully? Richard felt torn between following the rules and his commitment to doing his very best for his students. The boys were taken to the detention facility, and Richard contacted the parents. James' mother took the stance that James could just sit there for a while and maybe he would learn his lesson. However, David's mother hung up on Richard and showed up at Richard's office at Rocket Junior High. Richard explained the situation to David's mom, to which she asked why her son was in trouble if James admitted the knuckles were his and that he forced David to hold them. Richard had no logical answer for David's mom. Richard assured David's mom that he would do all that he could to protect David, while wondering in his own mind why he had not protected David. Richard completed the paperwork for James according to school policy, but he did not complete the paperwork on David. He believed that David was an innocent victim, and his history of being an honor student, with a spotless school record, James believed that David had been an innocent victim, and also knew that James had a tendency to intimidate others. Richard did not file the paperwork on David, knowing that David would having to attend DAEP would destroy his future and his potential. Richard received a call from the director of secondary education, who instructed him to complete the paperwork on David. Richard stated that he would not be able to comply with the directive. The director stated that he understood Richard's position, but said if he did not comply, he would have no choice but to write Richard an official reprimand that would go in his personnel file. Legal and ethical concerns. Ethical concerns is that David has been harmed by the principal's handling of the situation ethically. I believe that Richard mishandled the situation. He believed that James' behavior had improved, and he knew that David had no negative history on his record. So having him escorted by the school police was a bit much, and he may have been discriminatory in his actions toward David Ramos. Richard wants the best for his students, but he did not take the time to think through the situation and everything involved. There may have been other witnesses that could have given more perspective, and it seems as though the principal assumed the worst about the situation, and he also reacted too hastily, which caused David a great deal of harm. There has been no breach of contract, but I believe it is Richard's own guilt that is driving him to not write the report on David, thereby keeping him out of DAEP. I do support Richard's choice to do his best to protect David by not writing the report. However, it will be a hard-learned ethical lesson which may be a black mark against Richard. Summing things up, Richard Inman, assistant principal of Rocket Junior High, calls two students to his office after hearing of an exchange between the two boys. Suspicious of the possibility of drugs being involved, Richard makes a quick decision to involve campus security. Richard's quick decision led to both boys, one of which was an outstanding student, facing felony charges and expulsion for no less than 45 days. Relevant facts about the case. We know that David is an outstanding student. After taking a moment to think about things, the only memory Richard has of David is after a Christmas concert wherein Richard congratulates David on his performance. Richard has taken a great deal of time to get to know a particular group of students in his school and neglected to get to know other students. David Ramos is Hispanic, and that fact may have impacted Richard's decision to suspect that drugs were involved. Richard seems partial to James. Very relevant to the case is the fact that Richard is from the same neighborhood that James is from. Also relevant is that James has a known history of bullying. Richard works hard to cultivate a relationship with the boys from the South Side, and he models and communicates ethics, which has improved the boys' school performance and peer relationships. A teacher witnesses an exchange between David and James. Richard does not take the time to talk more about the teacher that witnessed the exchange. We do not know if there may have been more information that could have prevented the situation from going down like it did. Richard does not evaluate and communicate before making his decision. The place is Rocket Junior High. It's an urban school. We do not know much about the demographics or physical condition of the school. One question I consider is whether or not there are security cameras in the school. Is there a way to check footage to see the exchange and prove that David was threatened and forced to hold the knuckles? The program, it's unknown. One unknown relevant piece is whether or not the public junior high school of 900 students had a program that prevents bullying and teaches students how to respond to bullying. To review and prioritize damage from the conflict and decisions. David's school reputation could be damaged due to the conflict, even though he was forced into it. He now has a felony charge on his record. The conflict and decision could also impact the relationship between any ethnic divisions within the school, student body, and staff. Richard also has an important stake in all of this. First off, his quick decision has created a serious conflict for himself and David. Richard may have a written reprimand in his file. He could even lose his job. In a situation where there may be an ethnic division, secondly, this could become publicized, which will be negative for Rocket Junior High and the school board. Very few stakeholders were involved in the decision that Richard made. Does the reporting teacher have any more information about the exchange? I do not feel like I have enough information to make a decision about the current situation as it stands. And I would not have had enough information to make the decision to call both boys in at the same time and to involve the security guard. Options and consequences. I could do nothing. I could not complete the paperwork for David and let the chips fall where they may. I could also take a stance against the board policies that created the rules that states that no matter what the situation, any student with a weapon on premises will face charges. I could insist that the rules be revised to allow for situations such as this, and I could insist that in a school of 900 students there must be security cameras, presuming there are none. Intermediate strategies would be to ask the school to drop the charges against David or help pay for any legal action that would be needed to support him through the legal matter and expunge his records. I could also argue for the school board to seek a comprehensive anti-bullying curriculum that would teach students how to handle the situation where they're being bullied. Evaluating. The con of doing nothing is that the policy that caused this conflict will not be fixed. The con of insisting that revisions be made to board rules are that there is always going to be gray areas, so making loopholes is not a good policy. Rules should not be subjective. The con of insisting on security cameras and anti-bullying curriculum is the expense to the school. The pros of security cameras and curriculum on anti-bullying is that it would help avoid conflicts like this, and stakeholders are better protected. The pros of seeking support for David and his family shows that we want the best for our students, and that a possible error in judgment was made, but that we will try to make it right. Supporting David could also avoid any potential divisions between ethnic groups within stakeholders, which is important. So choosing the best option. The best decision I can make for David is to make a plight to the board to support him in his felony, to help it expunge his felony charge. This decision demonstrates that we recognize that there are errors in the system that caused him to be in this conflict. The best decision to make for the stakeholders is to have cameras installed in the school and invest in a curriculum that comprehensively addresses bullying. I've consulted with the board about supporting David and about the need for security cameras and curriculum. I believe I have identified creative options. Implementing my plan, I'm going to take responsibility for my quick decision that may have been based on judgments which led to this situation. I will ask the board to have the charges dropped or support David legally. I'll make a strong case for the need to have surveillance cameras installed inside and outside of the school, as well as investing in anti-bullying curriculum. Outcomes of my admission to making the quick decision could be that I may lose my job or be reprimanded, but I am going to do the right thing and take responsibility. The consequences of supporting David or dropping charges leave a possible situation where other cases may seek the same resolution. Consequences of asking for funds to be allocated for cameras and curriculum could be that stakeholders say no, or that I may be blamed for creating a situation where they are needed. This is not a decision I can manage on my own, as it will take board support to reconcile. I will reason with the board on how supporting David could avoid ethnic conflicts between stakeholders. I will also explain the need for allocating funds for cameras and curriculum to help create positive work conditions, and I will use data to support the use of both. My plan B. If my chosen plan does not work, I can do everything in my power to protect David legally and to help his reputation. I can work harder to get to know all of the students and possibly avoid any hard feelings within the groups, and make sure that I am not making judgments based on race, as well as modeling ethics to support the current and future success of my students. I will not complete the paperwork on David, and I will accept any reprimand I may receive. Thank you so much for watching my presentation, and I've enjoyed this 8 weeks. I hope you all have a great little few days off before our next 8 weeks starts.